All right, Rabbi, good afternoon. Such a schos, Baruch Hashem, to be able to begin our Yarchei Kala with a little bit of Daf Yomi, or a lot of bit of Daf Yomi. Baruch Hashem, we have a lot to do today. Today's Daf is Samech Gimel. Samech Gimel. And like Rabbi Shalom just said, it reminded of the words of Rabbi Nachman. And Rabbi Nachman says that when a Yid closes his eyes and he yearns to be in Eretz Yisrael, the neshama, only the body is confined by physical limitations. The soul is not. So the neshama could be anywhere you want it to be. So if a person closes his eyes and he says, I want to be in Eretz Yisrael, the neshama is automatically transported to Eretz Yisrael. So alachas kama v'kama, we've begun our trip. Mincha, Ashrei was the haschala. Ashrei was the beginning of the journey. And what a way to begin the journey. Ashrei yoshevei veisecha. Praiseworthy are those who sit in Yom HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Then we're going to sit for a bit in this home of the Ribono Shel Olam. Then we're going to be sitting for a very long time. After that, Amirat Hashem in different mediums. But all of it on our way to Eretz Yisrael, Amirat Hashem. And again, we begin this beautiful journey with Gemara, with Torah, with the Ribono Shel Olam. So also with that, let us begin. Today's daf is Samech Gimel. Well, tomorrow's daf. Tuesday's daf is Samech Gimel. We left off today on the bottom of Samach Beis Mabei 62b. I realized I left off like about 2 lines from before the actual end of the sugya. So we're picking up 4 lines up from the bottom. Rabbi Yochanan Tamei. Rabbi Yochanan goes according to his reasoning. Rabbi Yochanan says, the lomoki masnisa reisha b'chataima v'seifa b'chataima. Rabbi Yochanan himself doesn't like to establish a braisa reflecting 2 different opinions. Rabbi Yochanan says, man the metargim li chavis aliba dechatana. Whoever could interpret for me the braisa, or the Mishnah I should say, of chavis. Now we're not going to get into this, but Rashi is actually a fascinating case. Rashi deals with this case. This is where I deposit a barrel for Ruvain, and Ruvain goes ahead and moves it. So what happens if halacha l'maisa again during the course of moving it, so something happens to the barrel? So there's a whole discussion about what's the level of liability. Well, it depends. Is Ruvain moving it for his own purposes? Is he moving it for the barrel's purposes? So there's a whole discussion, a whole arichos, which we're not going to get into. But the point of it is that Rabbi Yochanan does not like establishing a brayso according to opinions. Rabbi Yochanan said, whoever could interpret for me the entire Mishnah of Chavis in accordance with one opinion, I will carry his items to the bathhouse. Now, carrying someone's item to the bathhouse is like a form of shibud, like a form of servitude, right? So that's like essentially, if you go ahead and you answer this up for me, I'll be your butler. Okay, good. So let's go right there. Gufa, the Gemara says, Gufa, Amar, top of Samach Gimel, 63a. Amar Rabbi Yami. It's an interesting case here. Zibeach v'kita v'nisech b'helam echad enu chayv ela achos. So this is Rabbi Ami. Rabbi Ami says that halacha l'maisa, if you serve avodah zara and you go ahead and you do the following. Now listen to this. So busy day. You offer up the karban, you offer incense, you do a wine libation, and you do all of this. So multiple acts of service of avodah zara, but all b'helam echad. What does helam echad mean? One lapse of awareness. So what's the halacha? So we'll say, so this is the shita of Rabbi Ami. So Rabbi Ami says, multiple avodas committed behelam echad, you're only going to be chayiv once. Amar Abaye says, my time to Rabbi Ami, what's Rabbi Ami's logic? Amar Krat, as the pasuk says, lo savdem. Torah says, don't serve avodah zara. Hakasav asan kulan avodah achos. So the Torah makes all of avodah zara into one avodah. So lo savde means don't serve avodah zara. So whatever you do for avodah, in other words, everything involved in the service of avodah zara, by definition is under this one umbrella, and therefore even if you do multiple acts of avodah zara, behelamech and one lapse of awareness, you're only going to be chayiv once. So the Gemara says, okay, Umi amar Abaye hachi, does Abaye really hold this way? So the Gemara says, Amar Abaye shalosh ishtachavos ba'avodas kochavim lama. So the Torah mentions the prohibition of prostration, of bowing down to avodah zara 3 times. Why 3 times? So the Gemara says, achos lekedarka. So one ultimately is the teacher's kedarka. I will say, what does kedarka mean? Kedarka means I'm not allowed to bow down to an avodah zara when that is the normal way to worship it. That's called kedarka. V'achos shelo kedarka. What shelo kedarka? So I'll say, interestingly enough, there are certain forms of idol worship that are prohibited even if it is not the prescribed way to worship an idol. So for example, let's say a particular avodah zara, and the way to worship the avodah zara, let's say, is to defecate on it. Right? That's not so crazy. After all, that's Baal Pa'ar. Right? So halacha l'maisa, if you go ahead and let's say you bow down to it, you're still going to be chayiv. It's going to be chayiv, right? Why? Because bowing down is considered to be a normative act of worship. But that's called shelo kedarka. So if you bow down to an idol, even though that's not the way to go ahead and serve the idol, you're still going to be chayiv. V'achos l'chalik, right? V'achos l'chalik, and one is to create individuated obligation or liability. We saw this in Monday's daf. We saw this, right? That even if you go ahead and you worship avodah zarah multiple ways, you're chayiv for each type of worship. Okay, that's what the Gemara says. So point over here is that Abaye disagrees with Rabbi Ami, to which the Gemara says, Rabbi Ami kamar v'lei lo sirlei. No. Abaye was espousing his idea in accordance with Rabbi Ami, but Abaye himself does not hold it this way. So we'll say, so this is interesting. So I just want to point out an interesting machlokes over here. Rabbi Ami is of the opinion that if you perform multiple acts of avodah zarah service in one lapse, you're only chayiv once. Rabbi Abaye, on the other hand, holds that halacha l'maisa, you're chayiv for each individual act. Okay, just keep that machlokes in mind. Gufa says, Amar Abaye, shalosh ishtachavalos b'avodas kochavim lamo. So why does the Torah have to mention the prohibition of prostration 3 times when it comes to avodah zarah? To which the Gemara says, I'll tell you why. Achos l'kedarka. One is to teach about the prohibition when that is the normal way to worship the avodah zarah. The achos shelo kedarka. One is to prohibit the ishtachava, prostration, even when it's not the normal way to worship the avodah zarah. The achas l'chalik, and one to create distinguished liability. The achas l'chalik. So the Gemara says, 1 second. L'kedarka me'echa yavda goy me'ela nafka. But we learn out Kedarka, the idea that you're not allowed to bow down to an idol, when that is the normal form of worship. We learn that out from a different type of possibility. I feel compelled to say this now. I just want to point out, the dapim over Yarchei Kala are ridiculously amazing and riveting. There's agarata, there's this. I see like a lot of word expressions about is this it? Is this what we're doing for the next week together? So first of all, you know what the great part about being with the Gemara that you love and with people that you love? It doesn't really matter what you're doing. As long as you're doing it together, the rest of it really makes absolutely no difference. But that being said, I also want to tell you, there is ridiculously riveting Gemara ahead of us. But again, to reap the benefits of Agarato, you have to put in the time going through the Shakla V'Tayv of these sugyas. So the Gemara says as follows. The Gemara says, for Kedarka, we learn from a different pasuk. Me'echa yavdu agoyim ha'ila nafka. Ella, rather again, the Gemara says, Abaye says, Ella achlas Kedarka, one mention of ishtachava, prostration. It's to teach me that you're not allowed to bow down to an idol if that's the normal way to worship it. This shelo Kedarka. I'm sorry, achlas Kedarka v'shelo Kedarka. One is to teach you about the prohibition to bow down to an idol if that's the normal form of worship, and even if it's not the normal. In other words, they'll say there's like an in-between. What does that mean? So there's like three, we'll call it buckets. You can have an idol where the only way to worship it is bowing down to it. An idol where you never bow down to it. And an idol where sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. So the Gemara says that's one drasha. V'achas l'shelo kedarka, v'achas l'chalik. Okay, Shabbos says, so bottom line, by the way, what we begin to see over here is like Shabbos, where there is individuated obligation or liability for different malachas. So too again, when it comes to avodah zarah, there is also going to be individual liability for multiple forms of avodah zarah. Incredible. All right, let's go back there. Says Hamakablo alav be'eloka ha'be'eloha ha'omer lo eliata. So remember again, the Gemara says, if a person goes ahead and worships avodah zarah, and how does he worship it? He says, I hereby accept avodah zarah as my God, right? Or I say to the avodah zarah, eliata, you're my God. So the Mishnah said, you're chayiv for a lav. Not chayiv, me say chayiv for a lav. So the Gemara says, Amrav Nachman, Amrav Baradua, Amrav, Kevan Sha'amar Keliata, or I should say, eliata, when you say to an avodah zarah, you're my God, so the Gemara says, chayiv. But what are you chayiv for? Lemai. Ilik tala masnisini. So it can't be for death. Can't be for death. Why? Because what did the Mishnah say? If you go out and you proclaim your allegiance to an idol, so what's your liability? What's your liability? It's a lav. So it can't be misa. So the Gemara says, el carbon. It must be, we're talking about a case over here where you accidentally, right, you did this bishogeg, right? In other words, you thought it was mutter, so you went ahead and you said to the avodah zarah, you're my God. The halacha is your chayv carbon. Ba'afil Rabbana. Is that true even according to the Rabbana? Ba'atanya bos, listen to this. Eino chayiv al davar sheish bo ma'isa. Listen to this. Eino chayiv ela ad davar sheish bo ma'isa. For avodah zarah, you're only chayiv if you perform an act. You have to do something. You have to do a maisa. You have to do a maisa. For example, kigon, zibuach, v'kitor, v'nisuch, v'shtachava. What are example of actions? Slaughtering, incense, libations, or bowing down. Rish Lakish says, man tana ishtachava. Now, I want to point out something very interesting. If you look at that list, right, which one doesn't belong? Which one doesn't belong? Zibuach kitur, nisuch, ishtachava. What doesn't belong? What doesn't belong? Ishtachava. Bowing down. Why not? It's a shtick maisa. Like, in other words, it's not really a maisa. Right? In other words, slaughtering is a maisa, right? Libationizing, is a maisa, right? Insensitizing is a maisa, right? All of these things are actions, but ishtachava, ultimately, again, going ahead and bowing down, bipashtus is not a maisa. So who says that ishtachava? Who says that bowing is a maisa? Rabbi Akiva, it's Rabbi Akiva. The Amar, lo ba'inan maisa klal. Must be Rabbi Akiva, because the truth is Rabbi Akiva holds that you're chayiv, Rabbi Akiva holds that you're chayiv for avodah zarah, even without a maisa. Now, what does that mean? Now, that's tremendous, because if you hold that you're chayiv for avodah zarah, even without a maisa, then what does that mean? That means even if a person says Eliyato, avodah zarah, you're my God, that there would be liability for that, which would be tremendous. Mechlal d'Rabbanan sariba in a maisa. So again, if Rabbi Akiva is the disputant and he's saying that avodah zarah doesn't require a maisa, the Rabbanan must be saying that avodah zarah does require a maisa. To which the Gemara says, no. Ki ka amar Rav nami Rabbi Akiva kamar. And Rav is saying according to Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Akiva pshita. Hainu megadif. So according to Rabbi Akiva, so we'll say, so obviously again, you don't need a maisa for avodah zarah. Where does he learn that out? From megadif. What's megadif? Megadif is the blasphemer. What is blasphemy comprised of? What is it comprised of? Speech, right? And halacha l'maisa again, there's liability. The Gemara says, Ma'od tema, what would you have thought? Ma'od tema, ad kan lo mechayv Rabbi Akiva karban, ella b'megadif. So I might have thought ultimately again that maybe Rabbi Akiva would only be mechayv a karban in a case of megadif. Dichsiv be kares. Megadif is different, right? Why is megadif different? Because megadif itself has kares written into it. So the Gemara says, Aval hacha delo ksiv be kares. But over here, where it doesn't say kares, right, by where a person says Eliyato, Ema lo. I might have thought that maybe there's not avodah zarah liability for such an action. Kamash balon de iskushi iskush techse vayishtachavu lo vayizbechu lo vayomru lo. So both say this is shitas Rabbi Akiva, and this is really dramatic. Rabbi Akiva holds that halacha l'maisa. One is chay for avodah zarah even without a maisa, which means what? Person goes over to an avodah zarah and says Eliyato, you're my God. Halacha l'maisa. Rabbi Akiva says that's avodah zarah. And that's tremendous, because that's a contradistinction to the Rabbanon, right? Because the Rabbanon will say that you need a maisa. So I just want to point out how incredible that is. Of course, it's Rabbi Akiva that says that avodah zarah is chai without a maisa. Why? Because Rabbi Akiva is the one who holds that halacha l'maisa, even the smallest action in the realm of spirituality, has the most dramatic impact, right? Rabbi Akiva was the ignorant shepherd, where what did he see? What turned Rabbi Akiva around? We really should go. We're not going to the Kever Rabbi Akiva again. Chaval. All right, maybe Erev Shabbos. All right, so we'll say, so that was Kodesh Kadoshim. So let's just remember again, what turned Rabbi Akiva around? What turned him around? Right? Is the drop of water. Rabbi Akiva was the one who discovered that the smallest drop makes an impact. So Rabbi say, remember again, whatever is true in the realm of positivity is also true in the realm of negativity. If a drop of Kedusha could fundamentally transform a person, then a drop of Avodah Zarah could chas v'shalom fundamentally transform a person. In other words, energy is energy, and it impacts a person. Rabbi Akiva said a drop, the smallest influence, could have the most dramatic impact. So if a drop of water could transform you from an ignorant shepherd to a gadol hadar, then unfortunately, again, even a verbal statement of Avodah Zarah could take the highest neshama and bring it to the lowest of the low. It's incredible. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, what's a great Gemara? Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Elmolei vav shebehalucha nischayvu risheim shel Yisrael kaliyah. So I'll say this is very interesting. So, transitioning over here to the Chet HaEgel. So remember again, Klal Yisrael said when they built the Egel, Eli Elokecha Yisrael, Asher Ha'elucha Me'eretz Mitzrayim. Now, interestingly enough, Ha'elucha is plural, right? They brought you up. So Rabbi Yochanan says something very interesting. Also, listen to this. So we read this phrase, right? Literally translated, these are the gods that brought you up from Mitzrayim. They're both saying, now, what's going on over here? Essentially, what the Yidden are saying is, Klal Yisrael, it was Hashem and the Egel that brought you up. And Rabbi Yochanan essentially says, Baruch Hashem, they made it plural. Had they not made it plural, Klal Yisrael would have been destroyed. What does that mean? Rabbi Yochanan is being Melamed Tzchos. as much as they are worshipping Avodah Zarah, at least what did they do? At least they included HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the equation. Right? In other words, they could have said it was the eagle that brought us out. But at least they included Hashem, and they said again, Klal Yisrael, Elo Elokecha. It was HaKadosh Baruch Hu and this eagle that crossed us. So at least they included HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the equation. That was at least a saving grace for Klal Yisrael. So the Gemara says, Amar lo Rav Shimon Yochai. Rashbi says, what? Halvalo, kol mashatei shem shemaim v'davar acher ne'akam min ha'olam. How could you say that? If a person goes ahead and includes HaKadosh Baruch Hu together with an Avodah Zarah, literally again, they're uprooted from the world. In other words, the Bible said that's even worse. That's even worse. To include, you see, let's say, here's what's incredible. If you're an Oved Avodah Zarah, what is the upside of being an Oved Avodah Zarah? I know it sounds like a strange question, but what is the upside of being an Oved Avodah Zarah? What's the upside? The upside is you chose a team. Choose a team. Choose a team. Be decisive. Right? Cast your lot with someone. The worst thing in life, we'll say, the worst rebuke that the Navi Eliyahu gives Klal Yisrael, you know what the worst rebuke is? Ad masai atem poschim al shtei ha'seifim. How long are you going to straddle the fence? If you straddle the fence, nishtahin nishtaher, you can't do anything, right? If it's like, like, it's like the big fallacy of being like, like the big tent. Everybody wants to be the big tent. The big tent. Everything for everyone. And if you're everything for everyone, then what? You are nothing for no one. You right? You can't make everyone happy. You can't, right? It's Avram Avinu. By the way, I want to point out something incredible, right? Avram Avinu was the one who had the tent open on all four sides. And it's incredible. Avram Avinu was a unique personality, right? Everyone else, if you want to build something, it can't be everything for everyone. It's just not the way that it works. You could be some things for someone, but you got to represent something. You got to represent something. So incredible. Again, Rabbi Shmuel Silber says, no. Essentially, polytheism, including HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Avodah Zarah, that's a disaster. That's a disaster. At least Avodah Zarah, you've chosen a team. You've chosen the wrong team, but hopefully you could go ahead and maybe make a comeback afterwards. So how could he praise it? Which the Gemara says, Shneimar bilti l'Hashem levado, elamat hamulo ma'asher alucha, she'ivu elohus harbe. So ultimately, again, rather, what does it mean? What it means is that ultimately, again, they desire to worship many gods. So again, they didn't actually worship many gods, they desired to worship many gods. Okay. So what else I see interesting? So first I just want to point out over here, a fundamental machlokes in Rabbi Yochanan and Rashbi. Rabbi Yochanan praising Klal Yisrael because at least they never fully abandoned the Ribbon Shalom. Even with the Egel, they didn't fully abandon HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But ultimately, again, Rabbi Shmuel Silber, this is incredible. Rabbi Shmuel Silber says, if you're going to be an Oved Avodah Zarah, do it. Do it. And be wholly committed to it. Because in life, I will say, you know what the worst midah in life is? The worst midah in life is being a non-committal person. When you lack commitment, by definition, you never gain traction in your life. Better to be, it's going to sound strange, but just let it swirl around your mind a little bit. Better, here it is. Better to be committed to the wrong thing than to be committed to nothing. Because if you're committed to nothing, it means you lack the midah of commitment. You lack the midah of commitment, you're a zero. You're a zero. You're not going to do anything in life. If you're committed to the wrong thing, you're committed to something, and you're cultivating the midah of commitment, which means that when I get my act together, I'll find my way to go ahead and get on the right path. You know where else you see this? The Sefer HaChinuch brings down on the mitzvah of Som Tasim Alech HaMelech, to create a king. Get ready for this. Sefer HaChinuch says, it is better to have a bad king than no king. Right? You hear that? Why? What's the pshat? Because at least some leadership is better than no leadership. Right? No leadership, no one's going anywhere, right? No one's accomplishing anything. Bad leadership, okay, maybe we might go in the wrong direction, but at least we're moving. Some movement, even in the wrong direction, is better than no movement. They'll say that's why we know for ourselves. They'll say, what's better? What's better? To sin or to ultimately, again, flatline, be parav and apathetic? What's better? What's better? Yeah. Let's say the truth is, it's going to sound strange. Averos are better. No. I don't fill in the blank over here, right? Calm down. Right? But I'll say because at least if a person committing an avera, at least again, they're in a direction. Now again, don't use that halacha l'may. So we're speaking in theoretics, but at least I'm moving somewhere. The worst thing in life is stagnation. All right, let's go back there. But again, a person hugs and kisses or sweeps before, right, the avodah zarah, that's a lav. That's a lav. Says the Gemara, Ki aser avdimi am Rabbi Lazar, al kulam loke, chutz mehanoder bishmo, v'amakayim bishmo. So the Gemara says, listen, so Rav Dimi said as follows in Rabbi Lazar. For all of these things you get malchus, with the exception of, right, making a neder in the name. Gavi, if you need the cover, everyone needs there's sheets. No, come. Oh, take packets. We're all together. If anyone needs, the Gemaras are over here. So the Gemara says as follows. The Gemara says, Al kulam loke chutz mi'anoder b'shmo v'mechayim b'shmo. So ultimately again, for everything you get malchus, with the exception ultimately again of making a neder in the name of the avodah zarah, or ultimately again making it off. Mekayim means a shvua. So the Gemara says, the lo loki. So the Gemara says, why? Mishum mihavi le'lav she'in b'maisa. Interestingly enough, why? Because taking an oath or swearing is a lav she'in b'maisa. Right? It's a lav without an action associated with it. So the Gemara says, Hani nami lav shebechlosu. But the other ones also are a general lav. And in general, you don't get malchus. We'll say a lav shebechlolus is a lav that is learned out from a general statement. A general statement. So the Gemara says, Ve'in lokan lav shebechlolos, Desanyo, listen to this, Minayin she'olocha mina behema kodem shetetzin nafsha, shubalo sasa. How do you know that if you eat from an animal before it's totally dead? Now what does that mean? Animal had shchita, but it's still, what's the word? Flailing. Thank you. Flailing, moving around. How do you know that alocha l'maisa again? You're over on losas. Tamul lomar lo soklu aladam. Interesting. Lo soklu aladam. In other words, do not go ahead and eat, even though the animal's dead, right? You shecht it already, but when it's moving, it looks like it has life. Don't eat it. Davar achar lo soklu aladam lo soklu basar adayin dam b'mizrach. Another interpretation: don't eat on the blood. What does that mean? Don't eat when ultimately, again, the blood is still before zrika, before the blood has been sprinkled. Rabbi Dosi says, "Minayin sheim mevarin al harugei beis." And it's interesting. How do you know that we don't have a sudas havra for those who are killed by beis? Remember again, the halacha is, remember Mike Cotton says, after a person dies, the avelim come back and they have a sudas havra, a meal from the community. So how do I know that halacha l'maisa if somebody's executed by beis din? There is no sudas havra. Tamul omer lo soklu al adam. So don't go ahead and have a suda after the blood has been spilled by beis din. Okay, Rabbi Kiva says, Minayin the Sanhedrin shahagua sanefesh sheid tom and klum kalsu. How do we know that if Sanhedrin executed someone, that they don't eat for the rest of that day? Tamud lomar lo sochlu aladam. Incredible. So Rabbi Yochanan says, Ashar ben Sora mor minayin. From where do we know a prohibition, a lav about ben Sora mor? Tamud lomar lo sochlu al hadam. The pasuk says lo sochlu adam. Now, what does it mean about say? If you look at Rashi the Ben Sora more last Rashi or last line, to lo anash el imkin hishir vehechon hishir lo sochlu adam lo sochlu achila shetagin alav. It's interesting enough. It's telling Ben Sora Mora, don't eat the type of meal or don't eat the type of food that you're going to be executed about. If a Ben Sora, remember again, steals money to purchase meat or to drink wine, halacha l'maisa he's executed. So lo sochlu adam. Okay. Fine. So the Gemara goes weiter. Again. Okay. Good. You're not really looking at any of these things because it's a generalized lav. In general, you're only going to get malchus if what? If you take an oath by the name of the avodah zarah or you swear by the name of the avodah zarah. The Gemara says, why don't you get malchus for these other items? Because it is considered to be a generalized lav. Haninami lav shema ma'isa, but these other lav mar lav shema ma'isa. To which the Gemara says, Hahuk Rabbi Yehuda da'amar lav shema ma'isa lokin alav. Rabbi Yehuda holds that a lav that doesn't have a ma'isa, you still get malchus for it. Torah says, do not leave over from the karban until morning, karban Pesach. The Gemara says, Torah comes to give a positive commandment after the lo saseh. Amud Beis, lomar she'in lokin alav div Rabbi Yehuda. To teach us that you don't get malchus for this. Rabbi Yaakov says, Lo min Hashem uzeh ela mishum dahavli lav she'in b'maisa. V'chol lav she'in b'maisa in lokin alav. So again, Rabbi Shimon says, no, it's lav she'in b'maisa. Rabbi Yaakov says, it's lav she'in b'maisa. It's a lav without an action. And any lav without an action, you don't get malchus. Michlal, to Rabbi Yehuda savar lokin alav. What is Rabbi Yehuda holds that you do get malchus for alav shem ma'aser. So what's the fundamental machlokes? Do you get malchus for alav shem ma'aser or not? Machlokes, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yaakov. I will say first of all, Mazel Tov. We just finished our first Amud on Yarchei Kala. Incredible. I think it deserves a l'chaim. No, l'chaim. Should be zocheh meretz Hashem. I will say to really. This is such an opportunity, mamish, like to learn undistracted, to lose ourselves undistracted is not the schedule. I mean, there is a schedule, but we're not going to stick to it, and there's going to be so many different things that are happening over here. And just literally, again, to put your neshama in charge. The body's always in charge, and the mind is always in charge, and the phone is always in charge, and the schedule is always in charge, and everything else is always in charge. And the neshama is never in charge. Well, for the next couple of days, Meretz Hashem, it is only the neshama that is in charge. And when the neshama is in charge, everything always finds a beautiful way to come together. I will say l'chaim, Mazel on the first Amid. Should be zochim Hashem to many more amudim over the week to come. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam shakol niyeh bidvaro. Okay, let's go weiter. Says the Gemara, Hanod b'shmo v'makayim b'shmo harei zeh v'lo sasai. All right, for those watching this shir tomorrow morning, this was not a morning shir. I want to be clear. Right, it is 5 o'clock somewhere, but okay, good. So the Gemara says as follows: Hanoda b'shmo v'makayim b'shmo. So again, remember again. Then the Mishnah Hanoda b'shmo v'makayim b'shmo harei zeh v'lo sasai. If a person makes a neder. Chaver, the l'chaims are up here if anybody wants. This is not just my private stash over here. So the Gemara says as follows. The Gemara says a person makes a neder in the name of the Avodah Zarah, makes a shvuah in the name of the Avodah Zarah, it's a lo saseh. So the Gemara says, Hanod b'shov v'makayim b'shom minalon. From where do we know this? From the Sanya, v'shem Elohim achirim lo taskiru. So it's actually very important. The Torah says, you are not allowed to mention the name of another God. Can't mention it. The Sanya, v'shem Elohim achirim lo taskiru. Do not mention the name of another God. Listen to this. Shelo yomar adam l'chavero, shmar li b'tzad avodos kochavim plonis. So a person shouldn't say like this. A person shouldn't say, I want to meet my friend. I shouldn't say, you know what, let's meet up by Avodah Zarah so-and-so. Right? Let's meet by, the Avodah Zarah on the corner. Let's go ahead and let's meet up there. You shouldn't even use Avodah Zarah as a landmark. Don't even mention it. Lo yishma picha, that the name of Avodah Zarah should not even be heard on your mouth. How so? Shlo yader b'shmo. Shlo yader b'shmo v'lo yikayim b'shmo. V'lo yigrom la'achirim she'adiru b'shmo v'yakim b'shmo. So again, you shouldn't make an oath with Avodah Zarah. You shouldn't make a vow with Avodah Zarah, and you shouldn't cause the name of Avodah Zarah to be mentioned by other people as well. Davar achar, lo yishma picha. What does this mean? It shouldn't be heard by your mouth. Ashar lemesis u'lemadiach. This is a prohibition. Mesis Rabbosai is someone who encourages other people to worship Avodah Zarah, and Madiach is someone who gets an entire city, or Nidachas, to worship Avodah Zarah. The Gemara says, Mesis Pejik Siv, and Mesis is explicit, Ksiv Bey, V'chol Yisrael Yishmu V'yiro, El Ashar L'Madiach. Rather, again, the prohibition is to Madiach, someone who tries to get an entire city to worship Avodah Zarah. V'lo Yigrom La'achirim, Sheyidru b'shmo, v'sheikaimu b'shmo, and you shouldn't cause other people to make an oath with Avodah Zarah or to make a vow with Avodah Zarah. Mesele lavod l'shmo. Don't avodah l'shmo. It's very interesting. Get ready for this. Asra li adam shiyasa shutfus ima ovid kochavim. A person should not go into business with an ovid kochavim and akum. Why not? Shema yischayiv lo shuva v'nishba ba'avodas kochavim shalom. Because we'll say, what's going to happen if you have a business dispute? What's going to happen? Your akum business partner is going to say, okay, you say you don't owe me any money. Swear by my idol that you don't owe me any money. And you're going to end up getting into a complicated situation because halacha l'maisa, again, now you have to go ahead and swear by his avodah zarah. Ba'torah amra lo yishma al picha. Okay, so we'll say an interesting story over here. Ki asa ula bas kolbeno. Bas Bekalambo. Ula went and he stayed in the city of Kalanbo. Okay, now as we're going to see, the name of the city was derived from the name of the Avodah Zarah. So what happened? So the Gemara said, only Rabba v'hecha bas mar. So Rabba said, Ula, where'd you stay? So Amalei Bekalanbo, I stayed in Kalanbo. Ula, how can you even say the name? How can you say the name, right? You're not even allowed to mention the name of Avodah Zarah. Aksuva b'Torah mutar lahaskir shma. So this is interesting. So Ula answered, any avodah zarah whose name is mentioned in the Torah, you're allowed to say it. You're allowed to say it. So the Gemara says, one second, where's kalan ba mentioned? Ba ha'echa ksiva d'chsiv kara bal keres or kara bal keres nevo. So we'll say, okay, so interestingly enough, so it's a contraction. Kara bal keres nevo, so kalan bo. So, but again, it's actually talking about two different avodah zarah. There's bal, which is an avodah zarah, and nevo, which is an avodah zarah. Now, literally translated, it means that bal crouches and nevo splashes. And I will say both of these are reference to diarrhea. Right? So again, what this is, the pasuk is mocking avodah zarah, saying that the avodah zarah, right, is like can't control his bowels. The Gemara says, "Ilo ksivalo." Is that true? It's if the avodah zarah is not mentioned in the Torah, you can't mention it. So the Gemara says, "Maser Mishashia re'ei achos meruba kishalosh right kishihi kimegidyon l'shilo shein shtei tvilos l'shnei svugim." You're supposed to listen to this. Zav. It wouldn't be a Yarchei Kala without a Zav. Right? Again. So as I say now we've got Riyotze, right, you've got Zav. So as I say now what happens? A guy it's not a party without the Zav, right? I'm just saying. Hey, so Lamaisa again, so Lamaisa, what happens? So remember again, a guy becomes a Zav, right? A Zav Gadol if he has 3 Re'iyos. What happens if he has 1 Re'iyah that lasts as long as 3 Re'iyos? All right, not a good day, right? But Lamaisa. So what happens now? How long is 3 Re'iyos? So the Gemara says, Kimegidyon l'shilo. The amount of time it takes to go from Megidyon. Now Megidyon is an avodah zarah. The amount of time it takes to go from Megidyon to Shiloh, which is the amount of time shein shtei tvilos u'shnei sipugin, which is enough time to immerse twice and dry off twice. So the Gemara says, Harei zeh zav gomer. That's zav gomer. So what do you see from here? Chazal in their shir are mentioning avodah zarah. Am Ravina Gad Nami Michtav Ksiv. No, this avodah zarah Megidyon, right, is also mentioned in the Torah in Tanakh. Ksiv Ha'orchim Lagad Shulchan. Okay, so Mar goes right. Amar Nachman Kol Etzinusa Sira. This is great. By the way, very important Gemara. Kol Etzinusa Sira Chutz Me'Litzanusa Da Avodas Kochav D'Sharia. I will say, Leitzanis is aser. Leitzanis is aser. Leitzanis is aser. Now, what does it mean, leitzanis? What does it mean, leitzanis? It just means, it's a good English word for leitzanis. Foolhardery. What? Levity. It's not levity, but it's not. Leitzanis is just, it's just like a foolishness. Like a foolish mockingkeit, right? That just right? A frivolous foolishness mockingkeit, right? So essentially what leitzanis is the ability to take anything that is serious and make it not serious. Now that is a very serious thing, or that's a very significant transgression, and a significant flaw. Why? Because, of course, look, let's say, is there a room in life for joking around? Of course. And is there room even for levity or for a little lightheadedness? Of course. But there also have to be things in life that are serious. And if a person, so a letz is someone who could take anything that is serious and meaningful and important and totally just like make it into foolishness. So that's a problem. That's a problem, because a person like that then doesn't have a respect for certain things. So the Gemara says you can't do any leitzanos except for avodah zarah. You want to make fun of avodah zarah, you can do whatever you want. The Chsiv, Gemara quotes this pasuk, Kara bal keres nevo. Karsu karu yachtov lo yochlu mileit maso. Chsiv, dibur la'agalos beis aben, yaguru shachin shomron, Ki aval alav imo ukmarav alav yagilu al kavodo ki gala mimeni al tikri kvodo ella kvedo. Gemara just brings this raya over here that you find many psukim by avodah zarah that seem to make like loose bowel references by avodah zarah. So why is that? Because you could have leitzanos by avodah zarah. All right, I'm Rabbi Yitzchak Ma'idich Siv v'ata Yosifu lachto v'yasu lahem masecha mikaspam. Kisvu nasam atzavim. So I'll say, my kisvu nasam atzavim. What does that mean? That literally again, I will say, so literally again, kisvu nasam means in their form, atzavim are idols. Melamed, I will say, listen to this. Melamed shakol echad ve'echad asad demustira, so umanichu bekiso. So we'll say, just so you appreciate how much people loved their avodah zarah. That what they do, every person who worshipped idolatry, he would make a little idol. He'd make like a little pestle, right? He'd make a little pestle, make a little idol. Because again, you don't want to have just like, the one on your front lawn, like that's like a big zach. You want to have something that you could take with you. And they made a little idol, and they would keep it inside of their pocket. And what happened? Then every once in a while they take it out. They would hug it, and they would kiss it. I would say, like the Mishnah in Avos says, Eizu chacham halomed mikol adam, right? Who is wise? One who is able to learn from every individual. I would say there's something to be learned even from Ovdei Avodah Zarah. Even from Ovdei Avodah Zarah, that you see how much an Ovdei Avodah Zarah loves his Avodah Zarah. We have to love HaKadosh Baruch Hu at least as much, if not more. So to take out, right, they take out their idol, and they hug it and they kiss it. That's loving. Most there's very quickly. Actually, no, we're not that far. We'll do it. Zevi, what time are we leaving? Now, okay. All right, good. We're almost there. So the Gemara says again, that's how much they would love. Yarchei Kala is Lamala Min Azman. First, is today President's Day? There's no traffic. No traffic. We're fine. Good. We're going to do tomorrow. What? No traffic. This is your first time. So the Gemara says fast. So we'll say the Gemara says like this. Mike is something good. So the Gemara says back. Good. So the Gemara says, My zovchei adam agalim yishkun. What does it mean when it says literally again? Those zovchei adam agalim, those who literally again. Now it's interesting. We'll see how to read this pasuk. But zovchei adam, men who serve or men who offer up the agalim, right? The calves. Kiss them. What does this mean? This is very interesting. Rabbi Yitzchak, the Rabbi Ami, Shemeshasi Avodah Zarah. Boss, listen to this. The people, the Avodah Zarah clergy were very smart. I will say, right? Everybody has to fundraise. Everybody, right? It doesn't matter what denomination of clergy you are. Everybody has to fundraise. So the Avodah Zarah clergy, they had this great idea. Look what they did. So they would go ahead and they'd identify who are the Gvirim. Who's the Gvir? Who are the rich guys, right, in the community? Listen to this. They would starve the calves. They wouldn't feed the calves. So what would happen? Then they would make a picture of the Gvirim and they would put it by the trough that the calf, right? So they would give the calves a little bit to eat. And when the calves had a little bit to eat, they would come to the trough. And in the trough, what would the calves see? A picture of the Gvir. So they associated the picture of the Gvir with food. Okay, then what would happen? The clergy, right, the Ovdei Avodah Zarah, would then let the calves loose. So what happened? That when the calves were set free, who would they run to? They'd run to the Gvirim, to the rich guys. And then what happened? Like the priests of the Avodah Zarah would say to the Gvirim, Omrim lo, Avodas kochavim chatzbe chavetz. Now, by the way, the calves to the Avodah Zarah. So what would the priests say? They would say, "Oh, you see, the Avodah Zarah loves you. The Avodah Zarah loves you. Look, he's coming up to you. He's nestling, snuggling. Okay, nestling, good, right? Nuzzling, right? Either. Nestling and nuzzling, right next to you. So you see, mamish, the Avodah Zarah loves you. Avodah Zarah loves you, right? Yavo v'yizbach atzmolo. And when the Avodah Zarah loves you so much, there's only one thing you should do, which is offer yourself up to the Avodah Zarah. Now, of course, what happens after they engage in self-sacrifice? Who owns their property? The Avodah Zarah. So the clergy of the Avodah Zarah are very sneaky in this way, and this was the way that they appropriated the assets of rich people. Okay, incredible. But then it shouldn't say the people who serve will kiss the calves. Rather, it should say the calves will kiss the people who will offer themselves up. Rather, see, in the world of Avodah Zarah, the highest level of worship was to offer up one's child. If you would be willing to offer up your child to the Avodah Zarah, that was like Kodesh Kadoshim. Right? That ultimately, again, showed that you were really committed to the Avodah Zarah. So if you were willing to offer up your child, so the priests of the Avodah Zarah would say to you, come, you could now come and kiss the idol. It's such a warped sense of things. We're going to end off with this piece, but the Gemara ends off by talking about the different types of Avodah Zarah. Their Avodah Zarah was called Sukkos Benos or Sachos Benos. Umay knew what was it? Tarnagola, it's a chicken. was a chicken. That was the avodah zarah. Va'anshe kus asu es nargal. What was nargal? Ma'inu tarnagol, a rooster. Okay. Va'anshe chamas asu es ashima. So anshe chamas, they worshipped ashima. What was ashima? U'ma'inu barcha karcha, a goat. A goat. Va'avim asu es nafkan ves tartek. What did they worship? Ma'inu kelev v'chamar, a dog and a donkey. Okay, v'hasafrovim sarfim esbeneim esbenoseim ba'esh la'adar melech va'an melech, and the safrovim, they would burn their children. They would offer up their children as sacrifices to Adar Melech and An Melech. Who's Adar Melech and An Melech? What is that? So Elohei safrovim umaynihu hapered v'hasus. So this refers to the donkey or the mule and the horse. Adar Melech. So we'll say, by the way, so ultimately again, why is a donkey called Adar Melech? The Adar Leila Mare B'ti'ina, because it ingratiates itself to its master, because it carries stuff. Va'an Melech, what's An Melech? The Ani Leila Mare B'kirba. Ultimately, again, that it's helpful to its master. Ultimately, again, the kirba, because ultimately it goes ahead and carries it. Incredible. Yeah, if you take a look, Rashi says, "The Adonai Mare Mahadras Adonav uMechabdo Shemashlich Alamaso Shayitzarch Liton Al Savaro Adonach Mahadras Malgo Klomas Adonav." A horse. So interestingly enough, a donkey ingratiates itself ultimately again to its master, Adar Melech, right? Why? Because it carries. And An Melech, the Ani Leila Mare, it answers the call of its master, ultimately again, because it carries the master. Af Chizkiah, Melech Yehuda, Bikesh Aviv Lasos Lokain. So remember again, we learned about Chizkiah Melech not so long ago. Right? Chizkiah Melech again was one of the righteous kings of Klal Yisrael, but his father Achaz was a tremendous Russian Obed Avodah Zarah. Achaz was such a Russian, Rabbi say, just so you understand, Achaz was ready to worship, to offer up his son Chizkiah as a carbon. Now, you have to understand, you could be an Aved Avodah Zarah, all you want. But Lamaisa, the ability to be so aduk in Avodah Zarah that literally, again, you're willing to go ahead and offer up your son as a carbon is like a different level. A different level. Commitment. It is commitment, right? So Achaz was ready to offer up his son Chizkiah, ultimately again as a carbon to Avodah Zarah. So the Gemara says, what happens? How is it? Elo shesachto imo salamandra. His mother smeared him with salamandra blood. So salamandra apparently is this type of creature that the blood of it is what's the word? Fire retardant, right, or fireproof, right? So if you smear it on you, the fire doesn't have any level of impact, ultimately, again, on you. So his mother smeared him with the salamandra, and ultimately, again, it went ahead and saved him from the fire. So we'll stop over here for today. This is how it is. I just want to point out, we're stopping with Chizkiah Melech Yehuda, Emir Hashem. Again, we're ending off with Malchus Yisrael, and now this is our last Gemara. We're going to end off with a piece about Eretz. That was it. We just ended off with Eretz Yisrael, and Amir Yisrael will say, next stop, next daf, Eretz Yisrael.